Welcome to Dawn of the New Earth. My name is Morgue. I'm an ex-Christian revealing hidden knowledge to transform consciousness. And today we are talking about what secret societies actually teach. Now, you hear a lot about secret societies, but it's usually drama and gossip and conspiracy theories. And what we're going to actually be looking at is what actually is taught within secret societies. Now, specifically, we're going to look at the Golden Dawn. Now, the Golden Dawn is one of the most influential secret societies on the Western occult tradition, and we're going to be seeing exactly what it is that they teach. If you don't know anything about the Golden Dawn, check out my first video in this playlist where I give a little bit of a history and a background. But today, we're not taking a look at a history or a background. We're taking a look at what is actually taught. And in addition to this, we're going to be taking a look at what magic is and understanding how we can understand magic in a rational and logical way without getting wrapped up in insanity, which can happen if one does not have their rational faculties about them when exploring this stuff. So what are secret societies actually teaching specifically with regard to the Golden Dawn? We're going to find out right now. It's going to be good. Before we get started, as always, make sure you like and subscribe. And if you want to help my channel grow, if you want to help me reach more people with this information, then become a member on YouTube or on Patreon. If you hit the join button below this video, you can see all the different memberships you can get. You can get access to our members only videos. There's a new one every week, our Discord server. There's a lot of stuff. Check it out. And it helps out the channel a lot. I want to remind you, a couple big announcements. My fourth book, Teleocracy, Creating the New Earth, is available right now. Just came out a couple weeks ago. And if you have no idea what I'm about, check out my first book, Neogenesis, Dawn of the New Mind. And I just released this book as an audiobook narrated by me. So you can check this out as an audiobook as well. For all that stuff, links are in the description of this video. You can also find my Spotify channel in the description of this video, where you can, consume this information on Spotify, which can be very helpful. All right. So today we are exploring what secret societies actually teach. And specifically, we are talking about the Golden Dawn. Now, the Golden Dawn is a secret society, like I said, that was highly influential, one of the most influential societies on the occult tradition and many of the forms of magic that are taught today. Now, we're going to be exploring this. And the main thing that I want to get across here is that exploring secret societies and magic in general and the occult can be very tricky because it takes a very strong rational foundation to be able to really understand what's being taught here. And what I mean by that is you'll have some people who look into magic and they'll think, this is a bunch of BS. This is just woo-woo. This is crazy. This makes no sense. It's just a bunch of mystical nonsense. And then you have other people who get into it and they take it literally, and it becomes like another religion where they're doing these rituals and they're doing these ceremonies and doing all this stuff, and they don't even really know what the heck it is that they're doing. And then what you need, but then there's the people who really come on in the middle here, where you realize that all of these different aspects of these systems are symbolic in that they have hidden meanings. I mean, that's what occult means. Occult means hidden. Esoteric means hidden, inner. And so esoteric, occult, inner, hidden, these things aren't meant to be taken at face value. And so what we're going to do is explore this in detail and really tease out the important bits to figure out what's actually going on here. And what I want to know from you guys, all right, is that we don't talk about this a lot on my channel. And we've kind of started to. And if you want more on this stuff, let me know. If you want more about secret societies, more about magic, more about these systems, tell me in the comments, because I take your comments seriously and I like to create what you enjoy watching. So let me know, because we're going to be taking a look at what the Golden Dawn teaches. But there's a lot more. I mean, it's incredibly in-depth just in the Golden Dawn. And there are many other systems as well. So make sure you tell me in the comments if you want more of this kind of stuff. All right, so we're going to begin. And to kind of kick things off, what we're going to do is I'm going to read some excerpts from a book called Self-Initiation into the Golden Dawn Tradition by Sheikh Cicero and Sandra Tabitha Cicero. Now, the reason why we're going to be reading some excerpts from this is because, in my opinion, this is one of the clearest, most level-headed explanations of the Golden Dawn system. And what I like about this particular book, because I've talked about this before, is that one has to be very careful when it comes to secret societies, because secret societies can engage in a lot of manipulation. A lot of people get into it for the wrong reasons, because they want power, they want control, and so they get an extreme amount of ego inflation, and they can manipulate lower members, and it can be a big problem. Now, I'm not saying that every society like that. I'm sure there's some decent ones out there, but it just breeds a lot of potential for manipulation in it. So be very careful. And, you know, I'm not recommending that you join any of these. But what I like about this particular book is that they essentially say, hey, you don't need to join an order or a society. Here is the information that is actually important. Here's the real value. So let's start right away, okay? First of all, let's look at the word initiation. Because when we think about secret societies, and by the way, when I say what do secret societies actually teach, many of them share very similar overall ideas, but they can come at it from extremely different ways. So particularly, we're looking at what the Golden Dawn teaches, how the Golden Dawn teaches it. Like I said, if you want other systems or more on this, let me know in the comments. But when you hear about secret societies, one of the words that comes up very often is initiation. So what is an initiation? So, according to this book, it says, since the earliest days of the ancient mystery religions, and the ancient mystery religions are those that were practiced, you know, there was the Egyptian mystery religions, there was the Greek mystery religions, the Eleusinian mysteries, the Dionysian mysteries, basically mystery schools, or they were called cults, even like the Pythagorean cult. And these were essentially secret society, ancient secret societies. So since the earliest days of the ancient mystery religions, the most profound spiritual experiences encountered by mystics have been highlighted by the act of initiation. Initiation into a mystical or magical group marks the beginning of a new life, which is dedicated to spiritual goals. It is the first step into a profound and supremely meaningful existence. So there's two ways you can look at initiation. In one way, you can look at it in, if one is going to, let's say, go join a secret society or advance to different grades, there are initiation rituals, and these are the actual physical rituals that one goes through. But on a spiritual level, an initiation happens in the mind. It happens in the soul. And it is a profound shift from the normal, mundane life into a life that is devoted to the transformation of the soul. So it's a shift in perspective. An initiation is essentially, when it's internal, it's basically going, I am making a shift from the ordinary to the transcendent. So here is an oath that is said by the Adeptus Minor of the Inner Order. All right, so this is an oath that is by the Adeptus Minor of the Inner Order. And the Golden Dawn had three different orders. There was the Outer Order, or the First Order, and there was the Inner Order, and then there was the Third Order. If we have time, we'll be talking about these different orders and how they relate and why it's structured that way if we have time. But this is an oath by an Adeptus Minor of the Inner Order, which says, I further promise and swear that with the divine permission, I will from this day forward apply myself to the great work, which is, what is the great work? to purify and exalt my spiritual nature, so that with the divine aid I may at length attain to be more than human, and thus gradually raise and unite myself to my higher and divine genius, and that in this event I will not abuse the great power entrusted to me. Okay, so this is an oath given by the Adeptus Minor of the Inner Order, so which comes after the Outer Order. The Outer Order is essentially about, and we'll get more into this, the Outer Order is essentially about balancing the psyche, preparing oneself to connect to one's higher self. When one advances to the Inner Order, it's about a soul or a mind that has begun to make contact with their higher self and is now going higher or beyond human. This is the Inner Order. And it says, yes, right here, this oath, the Adeptus Minor of the Inner Order committed him or herself to undertake, consciously and deliberately, that which was ordained as the birthright of all humanity, to become more than human. It is this that is the ultimate message of esotericism, that evolution continues, and the purpose of each life is to grow into the image set for us by our Creator, to attain and reveal our own divinity. So what's being said here is that the aim, the ultimate message of esotericism is the evolution of the soul such that we grow into the image and reveal our own divinity. What does that mean, the image? Well, in the Bible, it says that God created man and woman in his image. In other words, what they're getting at here, because remember, in esoterica, you don't take anything literal, it's symbolic. So being created in the image of God means essentially we have the divine blueprint within us, that when we activate it, we can become divine. So the goal of esotericism is to activate this divine blueprint within us to become divine. And we're going to see in these secret societies, particularly the Golden Dawn, it's about unlocking each of the different levels in this spiritual blueprint to achieve the highest levels possible, evolving beyond human, spiritually speaking. And this is often depicted through the tree of life. It doesn't have to be. There are many methods to do this, and we're going to explain why there are many methods to do this. And remember, stick with me. If some of this stuff sounds confusing or like kind of crazy, we're going to be unpacking this rationally and logically, and looking at it from a grounded state of mind. Okay, so it'll all start to connect. It'll all start to click. Let's see. See, all right. I love this quote here. It says, "You need neither to travel to the mountaintop nor obtain any tool other than your own consciousness. No garment need you other than that of your own imagination. No authority need you other than that of your own true will. Set forth then into the new dawn, a new start on the greatest adventure there is, to become one with the divine genius, to become one with the divinity within yourself. You don't need to travel anywhere. You don't need any tool. You don't need any kind of special clothing. You don't need anyone's permission. All you need is your own consciousness, your own imagination, and your own true will." And this is very similar to what Jesus said in the Gospel of Thomas, when Jesus says, "If anyone tells you the kingdom of heaven is in the sky, then the birds will be there before you. If they say it's in the sea, then the fish will be there before you. Rather, the kingdom is within you and it's all around you." This is essentially very similar to what Jesus was saying in the Gospel of Thomas, saying, hey, divinity, it's not outside, it's not somewhere in the sky. It's not somewhere in the sea. It's not somewhere you go to when you die. It's within you and all around you. You just have to be able to unlock the sea. You have to have the eyes to see. So, quoting now from the book, initiation means to begin, to embark upon something new. The characteristic of this event are marked by an expansion of the mind to include an awareness of higher levels of consciousness. Initiation means to begin something new, and this is marked by an awareness of higher levels of consciousness. And by the way, as I read this, I want you to kind of think about what we talk about in the Neogenian system and see how certain ideas align very well with this idea of the transformation of the self. Initiation is the initiation is the precursor of immortality. Humankind has the potential for immortality, but only obtains it when men and women align themselves with the immortal spiritual essence that underlies all aspects of the manifest universe. So humans can become immortal. Everyone has the potential for immortality. And guess what? This also has parallels to the Gospel of Thomas, where the Gospel of Thomas says, these are the secret teachings of Jesus Christ, and whoever understands these hidden messages will never die. Same idea, obtaining immortality. The alchemists talk about obtaining immortality as well. You see this constantly in esoterica, this idea of obtaining immortality. What does this mean? Well, this means when you realize that you are divine, when you unlock the secret of what existence is, you quote unquote become immortal because you realize you're eternal. Your physical body isn't immortal. You're not going to walk the earth like a vampire or some BS like that. It means what you actually are is an eternal soul that is just connected to an avatar that's allowing you to have a particular experience in this particular lifetime. So in the Neogenian system, this is why we have the triadic perspective of the avatar, the zeta, and the absolute. Avatar being your egoic self associated with the body in this particular lifetime, and the zetic perspective associated with your higher self, your inner star, the eternal self that you are. Obtaining that rare and splendid essence is the supreme objective of that part of the Western esoteric tradition known as magic. The goal of all magical processes is the purification of the natural human being. That is, the extraction of the pure gold, a chemical reference, of spiritual selfhood from the husk of the outer personality. Magic is a spiritual science. And I really like this definition of magic, but this actually is a definition of high magic. And we're really getting into high magic here. Golden Dawn is a tradition of high magic, which is different than low magic or practical magic. We've talked about the difference before, but just to touch on it, I think it's important real quick for those who might be new. High magic, which is what the Golden Dawn represents, is about connecting to the divine. It's about activating the divinity within you and becoming fully transformed. It's about transforming yourself, reaching higher levels of consciousness, connecting to divinity. Low magic or practical magic is more the kind of magic that people are familiar with, like, oh, I want to cast a love spell to bring love into my life, or I want to make money, so I'm going to cast a money spell, or whatever. And that's usually, ironically, what people are more interested in. They're like, oh, I want to know how to do it. But what's interesting about this is that what people don't really realize is that if you want to engage in practical magic, you necessarily need to understand high magic, because I mean, it can still work to a certain degree, even if you don't, but it'll be that much more powerful. If you imagine magic is like a flashlight, high magic is like the battery in the flashlight. It's going to power everything. And this is why, so this continues by saying ceremonial magic, which is high magic. Ceremonial magic incorporates a process of memorization and ritual. Okay, so now we're getting into like, okay, what is this? How does this work? This is important stuff. This is what most people misunderstand. So let's make sure we understand this well. This is important. Ceremonial magic or high magic incorporates a process of memorization and ritual, which results in the direct stimulation of the will and the exaltation of the imagination. So the reason for the rituals that are performed, the reason for the memorization of different symbols and systems is for what purpose? To stimulate the will. And what is the will? The will is ultimately the desire that you manifest in the world. It's your impetus for action. Stimulation of your will and the exaltation of the imagination. Why is this important? Because they go hand in hand. Your imagination is what creates something that you want to achieve. If you want to achieve something, you have to imagine it. You have to visualize it. You know, even if you want to, go think about what you want to have for dinner tonight, this involves imagination and will. If you want to have dinner, you have to think about, okay, where do I want to go to dinner tonight? Let's say I want to go to this particular restaurant. I'm feeling like ordering this particular food. I'm feeling like Indian food tonight. Then what do you have to do? After you have it in your imagination, you have to exercise your will to actually go out and do that. Meaning, your desire goes from the realm of simply being a desire, but to an action. That is the will. The process of magic is about augmenting and transforming the imagination and the will. Those powers that allow you to create in this world. So you can see, so far, this isn't anything crazy. This isn't about levitating or riding on broomsticks or making potions or anything of that nature. It's about techniques to improve and transform your conscious and creative powers. The final objective, I'm continuing to read now, the final objective of all this is the purification of the lower personality and the exaltation, realization of an elevated state of consciousness, wherein the magician's ego enters into a union with his or her own higher self and ultimately with the divine. Every action, idea, and utterance in any ceremony is designed to bring about this final conclusion. Each and every detail of the ritual itself serves to remind the operator of this single goal. This is important, right? This is what most people miss. And they're saying it very clear, very straightforward, very directly. The purpose of all ceremonial magic is the stimulation of the will, the exaltation of the imagination, and the raising of consciousness for the ego self to enter into a union with the higher self and divinity. And every action, every idea, every utterance in any ceremony is designed for this, to bring about this conclusion. Each and every detail of the ritual serves to remind the operator of the single goal. So as we go forward and begin to unpack the different teachings here and the different techniques, you're going to see all the different words, all the systems, all the tools serve as ways to accomplish this goal. It says a clear and open channel is created between the mind and the soul, concluding in an increased concentration of magical abilities and the exaltation of the true and divine nature of the magician. So creating an open channel between the mind and the soul. What does that mean in terms of our system? Because in our system, we say essentially that the eternal mind is the soul. Well, so we equate soul to mind. Psyche means soul, after all. So in our system, we would understand this as more like the lower mind connecting with the higher mind, or the lower self, or the ego, or ego consciousness connecting with the higher self. So you are an eternal mind, which is your higher self. But within this is your ego complex, which forms a very small part of what you actually are. So it's tapping in to the higher, greater, eternal mind that you are. It's about establishing a link between your ego and the higher self. And this is exactly what Carl Jung was talking about. So Carl Jung essentially had the idea of the self with a capital S, or we can call it the higher self to avoid confusion, and the ego. And for Carl Jung, the ego is a complex whose archetypal core is the higher self. And it's been said that the ego is the servant to the higher self. So the ego, there's an ego-self relationship, and it's about creating an open channel between that relationship, making that relationship explicit. Magic is real. It's not something that should be toyed with by dabblers who know next to nothing about the subject, but assume that it would be fun to make something happen. And I agree with this very much. Magic is real. It's nothing crazy. We can understand it rationally and logically as highly advanced psychology. And it gets into the realm of understanding that reality is mind. So when I say highly advanced psychology, I don't mean it in like a materialist understanding of psychology. I mean it in the true understanding of psychology, and that psyche means soul. So it's psychology was the study of the soul, and all reality is mind. And thus, as above, so below, the macrocosm reflects, or the microcosm reflects the macrocosm. We all have that blueprint within us to achieve actualization. And that's what this is about. So it says magic is not something that should be toyed with by dabblers who don't know what they're doing. Surgeons who practice medicine without a license often end up in jail. Superficial occultists who occasionally manage to open psychic doors without knowing what to do next sometimes end up in mental hospitals. This is why I say, if you've seen any of my other live streams, I say that you have to be very careful with magic and the occult, because you can go crazy. And you can go crazy because if you don't have an extremely firm grounding in reason, it becomes very hard to tell what is fact and what is fiction, what is real and what is fantasy. That line begins to become blurred. And a lot of people who get involved in the occult don't have that rational grounding, and they start to take the symbols as being real. They start to mistake the outer expression as being the true form, and not realizing that it actually represents symbolically something that exists within us. And people start to go crazy. They can't tell fact from fiction. They start believing in all kind of crazy stuff. So this is absolutely true. And why I always say, be very careful with this stuff, and why I want to go over this stuff with you guys on my channel here, so that we can stay rationally grounded, see what's interesting to learn from these things, but always be very careful, especially when it comes to like secret societies or orders or groups, because they can very much take advantage of that and be very manipulative. So be careful. Very, very careful. I can't stress that enough. This is, no joke with this kind of stuff. So the conscious commitment to, okay, so now we're, this is very important as well. So in magic, you learn all kinds of things, all kinds of symbolism. You understand, you begin to learn about Kabbalah and the tree of life, the elements, alchemy, and zodiac symbolism, all this sort of stuff. Hebrew alphabet, all kinds of symbols, all kinds of systems. And why? What's the point? Why the heck would anyone do that? Sounds like a big waste of time. Like, why the heck would you learn about the four elements? We know that the four elements isn't what literally makes up the physical universe. So why the hell would we learn about the four elements or anything like that? Well, here's an answer. The conscious commitment to learn the symbolic, magical alphabet of the unconscious mind results in the cultivation of psychic reflexes which aid the magician and make all ceremonial work flow more smoothly. But more importantly than this, the memorization of magical data changes the very structure of the psyche, which is gradually infiltrated by holy symbols that speak on a subconscious level to the divine being in each of us. The mind of the magician is steadily purified by this process as an increasing percentage of mundane thoughts are supplanted or transformed by spiritual thoughts. This is key. This is critical. So make sure you understand this stuff. This is the stuff that most people pass by. They don't realize that this is the true heart of high magic. Why are you learning about all these symbols? Why are you learning about all these different correspondences? What's the point? The point is that your unconscious mind does not communicate in language. Your unconscious communicates in symbols and metaphors. Like when you go to sleep and dream, your dream symbolically represents something. So when you begin to learn symbolism and correspondences, you are learning an alphabet of the unconscious mind. You are opening up a channel to connect with your unconscious mind. In other words, you're learning a language for your consciousness to communicate with your unconscious. And it says here that this changes the very structure of the psyche. And one example of this, quickly, is like the four elements. If you learn about air and fire and water and earth, and you begin to understand the various symbols that represent each of them and the various correspondences that they are attributed to. So, for example, really quick and superficially, we can understand air as representing intellect, reason, and communication. We can understand fire as representing libido, will, power, strength. We can understand water as representing the unconscious, emotions, intuition. We can understand earth as representing the physical world, actually going out and doing something, stability, being in the moment, success in finances, everything that is more practically related. And so you see, when you start to learn about these elements, it doesn't have anything to do about what matter is physically made up of. You're learning symbolism that corresponds to the structure of your psyche, archetypes. You're symbolically learning archetypal correspondences. And then so when you begin to learn how to balance the four elements, and let's say you do certain rituals that are about balancing these elements together, what's happening is this is sending a communication to your psyche, because you have projected essentially your psyche outwards. If you're, let's say, working with certain tools or what have you, you're communicating with your unconscious. And by consciously doing things that are balancing these elements, your psychic structure, psychic just meaning psyche, it doesn't mean like reading minds or anything. Psychic just means of the psyche. You're beginning to balance and inform your psyche how to begin to structure itself. So, if you want to improve your communicative abilities, you would work with the element of air. If you want to increase your willpower, you would work with the element of fire. Or you would work with all of them to balance them out. If you feel like there's something missing in your life, like, you know what, I really want to be more connected with my emotions, then you would work with the element of water. And these aren't like, you know, it's not like, it's like, I'm going to do a magic spell and it's just magically going to happen. That's not what it means. It means that you are consciously communicating to your unconscious mind and embedding the way that it needs to structure itself. And it furthermore says, the magical data changes the very structure of the psyche, which is gradually infiltrated by holy symbols or archetypal symbols that speak on a subconscious level to the divine in each of us. Speaks to our unconscious self. And the mind of the magician is steadily purified by this process as an increasing percentage of mundane thoughts are supplanted or transformed by spiritual thoughts. And what that means is, again, I think the 4 elements is a really good one because it's pretty simple, pretty easy to grasp, and it's a good example. So what this means is, you know, take the average person. They're thinking about what they want to eat for dinner, what they're going to watch on Netflix tonight, what kind of party they're going to go to on the weekend. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with those things. There's nothing wrong with going to nice restaurants and watching Netflix and having parties on the weekend. But for most people, this is all they think about all the time. And what this is essentially saying is that in addition to having these symbolisms, symbolic archetypes structure the psyche, is that it is going to transform the way you think as well. So if you're taking the time, for example, to learn about the different correspondences between the elements and the different tools that represent the different elements, you know, sword for air, wands for fire, cups for water, pentacles for earth, you know, and the different symbolism, you know, you're concentrating on all this, you're learning all, so your mind begins to, and in my opinion too, there's some people who think, oh, you don't really need to know what they really mean. It's just going to work on an unconscious level. In my opinion, you need both. You need to know, for it to be most effective, you should consciously know what it means as well, because that's going to, you want to link between your consciousness and the unconscious. And if you consciously understand the symbolism, that's going to help even more inform the working into your unconscious. So you're transforming consciousness and you begin to concentrate on things that will lead to your, and you know, instead of thinking about Netflix and going to parties on the weekend, again, nothing wrong with that every now and then, but you start to contemplate, for example, balancing the 4 elements, which is balancing what's important in your life, realizing, oh, you know what, I really need to work on my willpower because I really want to accomplish this goal and I haven't been able to. So I'm going to work with the element of fire. That's just one example. You are now concentrating on things that are leading to your personal development and your transformation. This is the alchemical transformation of the soul into different stages, different grades, different degrees. So, and by the way, the first 4 grades in the Golden Dawn, which is related to the outer order, is all related to the 4 elements. So each grade represents a different element. So each individual who goes through each of the grade will concentrate on an element on each grade that they go through. So the first 4 grades are associated with each of the elements, and that's the outer order. And this is all about balancing your psyche. And what this will do is when you balance your psyche, this will open up the connection between you and your higher self, which is the goal, the union with the higher self. So you're balancing your psyche, and which was associated with the first 4 grades, and transitioning from the outer order to the inner order marks when one begins to focus on becoming beyond human. So the outer order is about balance and opening up communication. And then the inner order is about firmly establishing that unification with the higher self and going beyond ordinary consciousness, ordinary ordinary human existence. When the secret recesses of the inner self have been reached, communication with the universal power is then possible. And by the single act of one student tapping into this divine power, the whole of humanity is enriched. And this is what we talk about a lot about in the Neogenian system, where in the Neogenian system, for example, some people go, where do I start with all this? I want to help change the world. Where do I begin? Well, it begins with you. It begins with you leveling up your consciousness. And because when we are all part of a network, and when you transform yourself, you're better equipped to help others transform. This is going up Maslow's hierarchy from self-actualization to transcendence in the extended hierarchy. So when one is benefited, the all benefits when it comes to transformation of consciousness. And one quick thing that I want to note here is that there's a lot of really great magical rituals and whatnot. But I think what needs to be, and a lot of it's emphasizing actualizing divinity within the self, which I think is really important. But I do think that there also needs to be a very heavy emphasis on actualizing our collective unity as well. Realizing, because even in magic systems, people usually get very ego inflated, which is the opposite of what it should do. But they start, oh, I am a god. I am master over everyone. People should listen to me and what I have to say, and I am the master. They are the, student and whatnot. When really it should be like a teacher. Like Jesus Christ is a really good example of this. The Gnostic Jesus, not the traditional Christian interpretation that we have today. The good version, the esoteric Jesus. The morning star. So, here's a really good example. This is case in point as to, why I say be careful with secret societies and orders. It says to be an initiate means that one is accepted into an inner circle. It confers a sense of status and belonging and of having been uplifted through the disclosure of divinely inspired wisdom. So in my opinion, you got to be careful here, because when you start getting involved and like taking oaths of secrecy, and you kind of start to miss the point, and it becomes like, ooh, I want the special rank and the special title because I want to be above everyone else. And I want to be, one needs to be careful. The candidate seeking admittance must first prove him or herself worthy of inclusion into the group of magical tradition. The ritual of initiation is meant to purify and prepare the candidate to receive the secrets and teachings of that tradition current. A new initiate does not receive the total volume of knowledge immediately, but in gradual stages. This process of spiritual evolution begins at the bottom of a hierarchical ladder, each step of which is accompanied by an additional initiation ceremony and further study. I'm not a fan of this. I've talked about it a lot. I'm not a fan of this structure. I don't think there needs to be secrets. I don't think that there needs to be non-disclosure. I think that it should be much more open source, like you go to school. This should be accessible to everyone, for anyone, and it should be very clear what it is that you're going to learn. None of this smoke and mirrors stuff. I think that it has a very negative impact. But to the, I like this book because this book basically says you don't have to do any of that. You don't have to join a magic order. You don't have to join a secret society. You don't have to do any of that. You can understand this stuff yourself, just in your own consciousness. So the very name of the order, the Golden Dawn, alludes to the shining brilliance of the eternal and divine light breaking through the confines of darkness to herald the birth of a new day in the evolution of humankind. The aim of all the rituals and practical magic work of the Golden Dawn is to create a spiritual bond between the magician and the immortal self. So you can see this is high magic. This isn't about, oh, I want to cast a spell to make more money, or I want to cast a spell to attract romance into my life. These are for creating a bond between you and your immortal self and leading towards the evolution of all humanity to the next level. And I'm seeing, actually, I think that is quite a lot to chew on. And I'm looking at what's coming next. And we start to get into more about the different grades, what these different grades are about, and what one learns in them. And I think that that will be good for next time. And by the way, I've just read a few excerpts, little excerpts here and there from like half of the introduction. And this book is, I don't know, like 500, 600 pages. It's a long book. So my point being, oh no, I'm sorry, 1,250 pages. It's 1,250 pages. And so my point is, I'm really curious what you guys think. I want you to tell, and by the way, there's a playlist on Golden Dawn if you want to know more about the history of this order and how it was established and whatever, watch that. But I want to know your thoughts. Tell me, because like I said, magic and secret societies, it's a whole can of worms, extremely in-depth. There's so much to cover. So I want to know what you think. Tell me if this is something you're interested in. Do you want to hear more about magic? Do you want to hear more about the Golden Dawn tradition? Do you want to hear more about secret societies in general? Tell me if this is an area of interest to you, because this is something we could certainly explore, but there's a lot to it. So I want to know what you guys think. Tell me in the comments. I'm very curious to hear. And if you do want more, then we will continue this next week and begin to dive even deeper. And it gets very, very deep. Let me tell you, we've barely even scratched the surface. So my friends, thank you so much. Remember to check out my books. My books are in the description of this video. Start with Neogenesis, Dawn of the New Mind. If you want a rational structure, a rational foundation, this is where to begin. And if you enjoy my work, consider becoming a member to get access to members only videos. I want to give a big shout out to everyone who supports, especially Renaissance Fairy, Cassidy, Angela, DB, Nusalina, Christopher, Dallas, Digital, Seaweed, and everyone else. Thank you very much.